Welcome to Live, Life Inspired Views for Every Day. My name is Chris Meyer, and I'm a curious soul. As I prepared this podcast, I wondered what you would need to hear. Some of you are in a state of joy after the election, and others are in a state of despair. How can my words meet you both in the middle? So, one word both sides must surely share is the word hope. It reminds me of Winston Churchill, who was once asked by a reporter what his country's greatest weapon was against Hitler's Nazi regime. Without pausing a moment, he replied, "It has always been hope." He recounted how he had been called to the palace when Hitler began invading Holland and received the orders to ready England for an attack. He wrote in his journal at 3 a.m. the next morning that, "Never once did my heart quicken. It was as if all the fates came together and the trials of my past had been preparation for this very hour." Hmm. You're not going to believe it. I found another wonderful book. I just began listening to Hope for Cynics by Jamil Zaki. He's a professor of psychology at Stanford University. I love it. In the book, Zaki recounts a research experiment he and his colleagues conducted in 2022 with 100 Americans who were strongly divided by their politics. When told that they would be spending time in conversation with a person from the opposite political view, they were asked how they thought it might go. Most predicted that the conversations probably wouldn't go very well. However, at the conclusion, they were asked to rate the pleasantness of their conversations on a scale of 1 to 100 that they had had with a person of the opposite political position. The most common response was 100. People loved connecting. They were shocked by how open minded, warm, and interested in them that the other person was. Zadi states in the book that the data are clear that people are overall more trustworthy, kinder, more open minded, and friendlier than we realize. Sure, there are those who cause harm, but the average person underestimates the average person. When we give people a chance to show who they are by showing them a bit of faith and trust, they most often return it. I believe Zaki is right. And I wonder if one of the major dividers might be social media. Richard Rohr wrote, "Love is always yes. Yes to reality." If we would just get our prejudices and judgments out of the way, love can flow like a deep river of goodness and care. Several years ago in this podcast, I shared about my dear friend Millie Rosdale Ozenga. During my commute to Iowa State University during my doctoral studies, I often stayed with Millie and her husband Bob in Ames. Once, when was staying there, they had just returned from a cruise. We sat around the table after my class that night, and Millie reflected on the first night when they had just met the people who were to be their table mates at dinner for the week. Two women had come up to the table, and they were both quite large, wearing flowing, brightly colored momo dresses and talking loudly with overwhelming enthusiasm. Milly thought, with disappointment hovering on disdain, "Oh boy, this is going to be a long trip." Instead, she told me that those two women turned out to be the most delightful and interesting people. They were mother and daughter and so well read on many topics, with experiences of travel that dazzled the rest of the table mates. Milly ended the story and said, "I came to scoff, but I left with praise." Wow! What a reflection of a judgment that turned into love and acceptance. We can still own our political feelings, but what would happen if we left our judgment of others at the door when conversing with people in our family, in our community, at our jobs, in our churches? What if we focused on listening and sharing with tones of love and acceptance? We don't have to agree, but I think we might find we're probably closer to our core values with each other than we realize. We are all humans, after all, seeking to be loved and accepted, seeking a place to belong. Several weeks ago, I shared again with you about the Peace Bench in front of the Nobel Peace Center in Oslo, Norway. It's in tribute to the words shared by Nelson Mandela 10 years after he was released from prison. Mandela said, "The best weapon is to sit down and talk." A reflection to Winston Churchill's best weapon, hope. As Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Ellie Werner was a small child in London during World War II. She has spent most of her adult life researching resiliency. She writes in her book, Through the Eyes of the Innocent, that we need not despair. We can give hope to the children, provide them with the love of caring adults, a member of the family, a teacher, someone who will listen and hold their hands. We can use schools as places to restore structure and routine to young lives, where the children can learn the skills to rebuild their world in peace. We did it before when the whole world lay in ruins. We can do it again. Mm, powerful. This week, on your bathroom mirror, write, our best weapon is hope. Join me next Monday for Live, Life Inspired Views for Every Day. I'm Chris Meyer, and I'm a curious soul.